Hello and welcome to Phantom Fables TV. Don't forget to show your support by liking, commenting, subscribing, and turning on notifications. Let's get in to today's story. My best friend, since I was 7 years old, dropped down to one knee and opened a little box with a ring inside. His high school sweetheart standing in front of him with the sunset in the background. It was the most picture-perfect engagement I had ever seen in my life. My best friend had just gotten engaged. I was super happy for him, but at the same time, I was kind of sad because I knew eventually, once he got married, he wouldn't have as much time to hang out with me, which kind of sounds selfish, I have to admit, but nonetheless, I was happy for him and his fiancée. We had decided when we were 9 years old that we would be each other's best men at our weddings. It was no surprise to me when he approached me later that night and asked me to be his best man. I happily obliged. After a few months of planning and consideration, he told me he wanted to have his bachelor party on a small beach town on the southern coast. It was a small little town, so prices would be cheaper than staying somewhere like Miami. Honestly, I've never heard of the place, but based off the pictures I had seen on Google Images, it looked beautiful. It was a little town called Orange Beach, Alabama. Where we grew up, a beach vacation normally meant staying on the southern coast of Texas in Galveston or Corpus Christi. If you've never been to either of those towns, it's not exactly the nicest and cleanest places. So I was super stoked. He explained to me that he did not want any strippers or strange women out of respect for his soon to be wife and himself. I of course respected his wishes and made it clear to everyone else that planned on going there would be no exotic dancers or strippers. He planned a whole week of getting drunk, going to the beach, and fishing from the resort. As the date grew near, I got more excited. I definitely needed a vacation from work and the mundane day to day life. We all met at his house the night before we were supposed to depart, but we simply couldn't contain the excitement. So we decided to drive all night and hopefully reach the destination by sunrise. I was the one friend who worked overnight, so I agreed to drive the entire 9 hour drive. After several hours had passed, I grew really tired. Everyone else was asleep as well. After some time, we finally crossed into Alabama. I glanced down at the GPS on my phone to notice that we were about to cross an 80-mile stretch with no towns or civilization. I decided to make a quick pit stop. I hopped off on the next exit, hoping I could come across some sort of convenience store so I could get a cup of coffee, fill up on gas, and hop back on the road to hopefully get to our destination by sunrise, where I could sleep for a few hours. I quickly added a stop into my phone. The next closest stop was a little convenience store called Happy J's Convenience and Package Store. I thought to myself, this is perfect. I can go ahead and get some party supplies for the next day while I was out. I'm not quite sure why. I'm not quite sure why this really excited me. I guess because in Texas they had really strict liquor laws and alcohol rules. You weren't allowed to buy liquor after 9 o'clock, and the only place you could buy liquor was in a liquor store. I guess the fact that it was 2 o'clock in the morning and it was in a convenience store was exciting. I nudged my buddy sitting in the front passenger seat next to me, waking him up for a brief moment, to tell him I was making a stop. Half asleep, he grumbled and acknowledged me. I looked into the back seat to see our other buddies still passed out. I pulled the car up next to the pumps and inserted my credit card, but I kept getting the same message across the small, dull screen. See clerk. I shrugged my shoulders and started for the door. I paused about halfway between the pumps and the front door, questioning if they were really open after all. We were in the middle of nowhere, and there were no cars here, and the lights inside were really dimly lit, but the neon open sign was buzzing just above the door. I reached for the handle, and much to my surprise, it was open. This convenience store was a small 1,600 square foot home that looked like it was converted into a gas station. As I walked by the front counter, I noticed the hallway leading to what looked like a bedroom and a bathroom and a separate living quarters. The silence inside the store was deafening. I walked through the aisles, grabbing some coffee. some snacks, and a few bottles of booze to get our party started. I came to the counter and sat my goods down and waited for someone to come. After several minutes of sitting in silence, I decided to verbalize that I was here. I was met with more deafening silence. Against my better judgment, I went down the hallway to look in the other rooms to see if someone was in there. I opened what looked like someone's living quarters to find a lived in room with a bed and television set that was still on, as well as a fairly fresh microwave meal sitting on the table next to the bed. Further down the hallway, I found a bathroom and a small closet for cleaning materials, but there was still no sight of anyone anywhere. I started yelling fairly loudly to see if anyone was in the building. Still no answer. I decided I would go to the refrigerated section and peer back to see if anyone was locked in the freezer or refrigerator. I opened one of the fridges and peered behind the shelves into what I thought was a dimly lit room. I could hear the slow drip as if a faucet was running, or maybe a leaky pipe, but that was it. I looked at each of the refrigerators, hoping to find some kind of way in, thinking maybe possibly someone got stuck back there. I shut the fridge when a man walked into the store. He was a rather large man, wearing what appeared to be a biker leather jacket. He nodded his head and acknowledged me. He grabbed a beer from the ice chest and approached the counter. I called over to him. I don't think anyone's here. I've looked in the back. I've looked in the lobby. I've looked everywhere. I can't find anyone, but I'm trying to find a way into the refrigerator to see if someone might be stuck back there. He slowly raised a brow in confusion. As I said this, he slowly approached me with his beer clutched in his right hand. How long have you been here? He asked. About 10 minutes. That's odd, he said. He further explained that the store owner was an Asian family who not only worked here, but lived here. Did you by chance go to the garage all the way in the back? He asked. No, I didn't know where the garage was. Figuring I was in the South, I didn't want to venture too far off into somewhere someone might live, knowing I would probably get a gun pulled on me. The man motioned for me to follow him. We went down to the end of the hallway and took a right at one of the doors, which led into an open field behind the convenience store, which led to a detached garage. Let's go check it out, I guess, he said, as we slowly made our way across the backyard towards the detached garage. I extended my hand and introduced myself to the man. He reciprocated and hesitantly told me his name was Mike. It put me at ease that I now know the man's name. I mean, if he was going to take me out into that garage and hurt me, he wouldn't have told me his name, right? The door to the garage was locked. I started to tell Mike I was going to call the police, but before the words could leave my mouth, he took a step back, and on one leg, he kicked the door open. He pulled a large flashlight out of his back pocket as we proceeded into the garage. It was completely dark, except for one lonesome light bulb dangling from the ceiling in the back corner. The garage was not very big. Mike moved his flashlight to the right side to reveal bare walls and dusty floors. I pulled the flashlight out on my phone and went to the left side, where to my horror, I found the entire family. They were crucified to the walls of the garage. It looked like they had been here for some time. Flies and maggots covered their entire bodies, and the stench automatically hit me. I became nauseous, and when I turned to run, Mike put me in a chokehold, and he covered my mouth and my nose with a rag. When I had awoken, I was tied to a chair, my head still spinning. I looked up to find Mike sitting right in front of me, with a beer in his hand and a revolver in the other. The barrel was pointed lazily at my torso. What the hell are you doing away out here? He asked. He threw my driver's license with my wallet down on the floor in front of me, displaying that my driver's license was a Texas identification card. I took a deep breath, ready to scream for my life, when he cocked the hammer back on his revolver and told me to be quiet or he would kill me. My voice trembled as I attempted to tell him I was traveling on vacation. I was trying not to tip off that I wasn't traveling alone. It looks like you just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time, Mr. McMillan. I was trying to avoid asking the one question anyone would have wanted to ask in that situation because I knew I probably wasn't going to like the answer. Why did you do this? I asked. For some odd reason, I was extremely calm. I was just too tired, exhausted, and traumatized to be worked up. He went on to tell me the story about how he was a young kid with no direction, but he happened upon a man who offered him shelter and a home life. Unfortunately, this man was the leader of a motorcycle gang, and after many years of running with this gang, he became the right-hand man of the gang boss. But the boss grew older. He got sloppier in his work, and one day they walked into this convenience store to rob it. When the father of the family that lived there pulled a shotgun, pulling a trigger once and emptying both loads of the double barrel shotgun into the boss's head. After narrowly escaping with his life, he ran away and became the new gang boss. But shortly after, the gang fell apart, and he had nobody and nothing else to live for. He decided to come back and get revenge for his former gang boss. He went into great detail about how he did it. He snuck off behind the carbonated drink fountain and disconnected the carbon dioxide tank and cracked it open. And a few hours later, the family was overcome with carbon dioxide. He took them to the garage where, one by one, with nails through their hands, arms, and feet, crucified them to the wall of the garage, where he then proceeded to keep them alive for several days. Somehow he went on to say that he had been there for about a month and no one had asked any questions, so he figured he would stay in the convenience store and get some free alcohol, food, and a place to live for a while before finding his next stop. My chair was fixed so I was facing the poor family crucified to the wall. Tears finally formed in my eyes. I was terrified. I was face to face with a monster who had just killed an entire innocent family who was just protecting their livelihood. My phone began vibrating in my pocket. I knew it was probably one of my friends who had woken up. I started to cough and cry inconsolably to hopefully cover the sound of the buzzing phone in my pocket. I begged the man for my life. I lied and told him that I had a family with 4 kids at home and a loving wife. I pleaded with him, telling him that I would not say anything to anyone. He looked at me with a menacing look. I'm sorry, kid. This is just business as usual. He stood up from his chair, took a sip of his beer, lit a cigarette before picking up his revolver and cocking the hammer back once again. He looked straight down the barrel at my head, my heart pounding in my chest, tears streaming down my face, my teeth clenched as tight as they possibly would without breaking. I opened my eyes to see the cherry on his cigarette brighten as he took a drag, and out of the corner of my eye, a shadow went past the window on the garage. I had to think of some way to stall him, so whoever was hopefully outside would come in and save me. And before the man could pull the trigger, the door was kicked open with a hellacious force. It was my best friend. Before the man could turn around and point the gun at my friend, he chunked a fire extinguisher at the man's head, knocking him down to his knees. My friend gave him a couple more blows to the head before knocking him unconscious. My friend grabbed the nearest sharp item off the shelf in the garage and cut me free. We jumped up and ran back across the yard around the side of the convenience store and got into my truck and took off. We drove another 30 miles before we were able to get cell phone service to call 911. We stopped at a well-lit public rest stop where we were met with a state police officer. We told him our story, and just as the sun came up, the state police officer walked over to us sitting in the bed of my truck and told us that the man had died from a severe head injury. We were escorted into the nearest town for questioning, where we spent almost an entire day talking to police, telling them our story. Luckily, my friend had woken up and realized I had been gone for some time and decided to come check on me. The other 2 guys remained asleep until we made a mad dash back to the vehicle and tore off. That poor innocent family. I cannot begin to imagine what they must have felt in their final moments and how long they had to suffer and endure the torture this man inflicted on them. To this day, I don't travel anywhere alone or go any place remotely sketchy by myself for this very reason.